Welcome to the Daily's News Currents. Today is 10/22, and for today's headlines we have Harris' early career, prosecutor by day, boldface name by night. Water dispute before Supreme Court gives rise to unusual alliances. Two aviators died in a plane crash after returning from a tour in Yemen. The Central Park Five are suing Trump over Philly debate comments. And an organization has novel way to get members to vote, but is it legal? Harris' early career, prosecutor by day, boldface name by night. As Kamala Harris toiled as a junior prosecutor in Alameda County, California, she developed important connections among San Francisco's financial and social elite. In August 1996, a jury in Oakland, California courtroom convicted a man of slicing off a portion of his girlfriend's scalp. The prosecutor was Kamala Harris, and the gruesome case was one of the few that made news early in her career. It was a vicious crime, Ms. Harris told the Oakland Tribune. She was in her 7th year as a rank-and-file prosecutor in Alameda County, doing battle with suspected drug lords and murderers in Oakland, which was still contending with the crack epidemic. Weeks later, Ms. Harris was back in the news, this time across the bay in San Francisco as a bold-faced name in the society pages among the young and fashionable who had gathered for a martini party in the Polo Ralph Lauren store ahead of the Fall Antiques Show. It was hosted by a group of art lovers who called themselves the Young Collectors, raising money for underserved children while collecting antiques, art, knowledge, and parties, Pat Stenger, the San Francisco Chronicle Society editor and columnist, wrote. During these formative years, when Miss Harris is in her 20s and her 30s, her life ran along two tracks that proved pivotal to her political ascendancy. By day, she developed the courtroom skills that have shaped her methodical approach as a candidate. By night, she moved through San Francisco's high society, nurturing the financial and political connections that became instrumental to her national rise. Miss Harris, who grew up in a modest neighborhood in Berkeley, California with a single mother, showed a talent for forging relationships with some of California's most influential elites while she was still a young prosecutor. She dated Willie Brown, one of the most powerful legislators in state history, who became mayor of San Francisco. She cultivated relationships with Susie Tompkins Buell, the founder of two iconic clothing brands, the Lauren Powell Jobs, who was married to Steve Jobs, the entrepreneur who made Apple a tech powerhouse. The ability to have people want to open up to you is not that different in the courtroom than it is in a cocktail party, said Teresa Denrick, who worked with Miss Harris as a prosecutor in the 1990s. The gritty streets of 1990 Oakland. The Alameda County District Attorney's Office was for decades known as a place for ambitious lawyers to cut their teeth. When Miss Harris arrived, Oakland was struggling at the tail end of the crack epidemic, and the war on drugs was in full force and homicides were at near record levels. When I was coming out of law school, you wanted to be a DA. You wanted to be either in Alameda County or Manhattan, Miss Denrick said. Those were the golden rings of DA offices at the time. A few years later, before Miss Harris joined the office, Felix Mitchell, an infamous drug lord in Oakland whose career was an inspiration for the movie New Jack City, had been arrested by the FBI and later stabbed to death in prison. That led to a leadership vacuum on the streets, as new drug bosses violently competed for territory. The Oakland that me and Kamala came into was an Oakland where its top lieutenants and new players in the game were recarving up Oakland, said Terry Wiley, a former prosecutor who joined the Alameda office the same year as Miss Harris. Centrist Democrats, including President Bill Clinton and Joseph R. Biden Jr., who was a powerful senator of Delaware at the time, advanced tough on crime policies that flooded cities with police officers and that used incarceration to fight drug use. Black communities were devastated by the harsh sentences that were imposed on crack cocaine, but that weren't applied to the powder version of the drug favored by wealthier white people. Miss Harris traveled down the path of new prosecutor, first misdemeanors, then felony preliminary hearings, then felony trials. She lived in Oakland, where the housing was still affordable, scooping up a one-bedroom condo near Lake Merritt for $116,000. She drove a Toyota Corolla and wore skirt suits in the time before pants were considered acceptable for women lawyers. Her days, she recalled in her memoir, regularly included poring over autopsy photos with the coroner and trying to get survivors of rape to talk while they recovered at the county hospital. A splashy debut in high society. In early 1994, Miss Harris entered San Francisco society circles with a splash in the column of Herb Cannon, the dapper and influential columnist for the Chronicle, who was close friends with Willie Brown, then the Speaker of the California State Assembly. Appearing in Mr. Kane's column was the San Francisco version of mentioning on page 6 of the New York Post, where Miss Harris, future challenger for the White House, Donald Trump, was showing up regularly. Mr. Kane's column in 1994 had an item about Mr. Brown's star-studded surprise birthday party. Barbra Streisand, Clint Eastwood were in attendance at a Beverly Hills mansion. Mr. Eastwood, Mr. Kane reported, ended up spilling champagne on the Speaker's new steady, Kamala Harris, at Amelita Co. Deputy DA, who was something new in Willie's love life. She's a woman, not a girl, and she's black. Mr. Brown was married, but he and his wife, Blanche Brown, had lived separate lives since the 1980s. The Speaker liked to joke that his age plus the age of his girlfriend could not exceed 100. At the time, he was 60, and Miss Harris was 29. Miss Harris was among several future political stars whose careers were propelled by Mr. Brown. That list included Gavin Newsom, now the California governor, and London Breed, the mayor of San Francisco. Mr. Brown appointed Miss Harris to 2 state boards, and he gave her an expensive present, a BMW to drive to Sacramento for meetings. Society columnists closely tracked Mr. Brown, and Miss Harris commented on her fashion choices and referred to her as a stylish, slender, successful, and very social. The couple attended San Francisco Symphony galas and celebrated the wedding of Mr. Kane's son at Grace Cathedral and Mr. Brown's 61st birthday at a party where Ray Charles performed. They shot pool at Tosca, a legendary North Beach bar, during an episode of ABC's Primetime Live, which profiled Mr. Brown, by then the mayor of San Francisco, in his flashy lifestyle. The couple traveled to Paris together and attended the Academy Awards. While Mr. Brown may have given her entry into those spaces, Miss Harris's charisma was a force of its own, several political contemporaries recalled. Mark Leno, a former state senator from San Francisco, recalled meeting her at a mayoral campaign event for Mr. Brown in 1995 and being struck by her star power and easy banter. "I thought, who is this woman?" Mr. Leno said, adding that they became fast friends, dining regularly over Caesar salads at the city's popular Zuni Cafe. Miss Harris became a trustee of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, where she started a program to connect students with art mentors. Danny Glover, the Lethal Weapon actor and a San Francisco native, was the chairman of the new effort. After Mr. Brown was elected mayor in San Francisco, Mr. Kane described Miss Harris as the new First Lady in waiting. Shortly after, though, Miss Harris broke off the relationship when it became clear that there was no real future with Mr. Brown, the former mayor has said. Miss Harris has excised Mr. Brown from her life story, never mentioning him or her in her 2 memoirs. She has bristled at the notion that he launched her career. As she campaigned for district attorney 8 years after breaking up with Mr. Brown, she told SF Weekly, "His career is over. I will be alive and kicking for the next 40 years. I do not owe him a thing." The original gangsters. In 1998, Miss Harris left Alameda and became an assistant district attorney in San Francisco, overseeing the career criminal unit under Terrence Hallinan, the progressive district attorney known as KO for his earlier life as a boxer. When San Francisco was regarded in prosecutor circles as less prestigious than Alameda, Miss Harris saw a better opportunity there to seek the top job. "There are too many good lawyers in Oakland with their eyes on running for office," said Nancy O'Malley, the former Alameda district attorney who oversaw Miss Harris's work. "When Kamala went over there, she knew she was going to take him down," said Miss O'Malley. Miss O'Malley said, referring to Mr. Hallinan. She was assessing, frankly, the landscape everywhere to see where she could go to move up. There, the 2 worlds she had been inhabiting, courtrooms and high society, came together, propelling her future political career. In her first trial in San Francisco, a robbery case, Mr. Brown, who was still the mayor but no longer her boyfriend, dropped by the courtroom to watch Miss Harris's closing arguments. The jury was a bit taken aback by the mayor's presence in the otherwise empty spectator gallery, one of the city's gossip columnists noted. Miss Harris left in 2000 to work in the San Francisco city attorney, but she did not stay away from the prosecutor's office for long. When Miss Harris decided in 2002 to run for district attorney against Miss Hallinan, the bonds she had cultivated with political elites in San Francisco paid off. Few were more important than her relationship with Miss Tompkins Boole, the founder of the clothing brands Esprit and The North Face, whose daughter, Summer Tompkins Walker, had befriended Miss Harris through the city's social scene. Miss Tompkins Boole's husband, the real estate developer and Democratic Party mega-donor Mark Boole, agreed over cheeseburgers to become finance chairman for her campaign. He took the meeting as a courtesy, but was quickly won over, Mr. Boole said in an interview. He assembled a finance committee that included Vanessa Getty, the daughter-in-law of the oil tycoon Gordon Getty, and Susan Swig, the daughter of Richard Swig, the chairman of Fairmont Hotels. They paved the way for who's who of San Francisco society to host receptions for Miss Harris, each of which garnered healthy sums of cash. Miss Harris spent thousands of dollars on flower bouquets to thank the host of the events, according to Jim Stearns, her campaign consultant in the DA race. Rising politicians often court the wealthy, but this group was particularly fruitful, given the kind of stratospheric wealth that the Bay Area would accumulate during the tech boom over the next 2 decades. Miss Harris entered the race polling at just 6%, but she would wound up beating her former boss, Mr. Hallinan. No one thought you could upset a sitting DA, Mr. Bowles said. It was really the beginning signs that when she puts her mind to something, he added, his voice trailing off. That promise came full circle this summer. It was July 2nd, 19 days before President Biden would end his re-election campaign and endorse her as the Democratic nominee. Ms. Harris stood up before a small group of deep-pocketed, longtime friends at a private fundraiser for the Biden-Harris ticket in San Francisco. Joyce Neustadt, a top Democratic Party fundraiser, and her wife, Susan Loveberg, a real estate executive, hosted about 36 people for lunch at their condominium up top Nob Hill, with sweeping views of the bay. Miss Harris seemed relaxed and happy to have traded Washington, D.C. for her former home of San Francisco for at least a few hours. She called those in the room, including the Bulls, my OGs, and then laughed as she explained that she meant original gangsters. The people in this room have been on this journey with me from the beginning, Miss Harris told them. I miss San Francisco. It all started here. Water dispute before Supreme Court gives rise to unusual alliances. The justices heard arguments on Wednesday in a long-simmering dispute between San Francisco and the EPA over regulation of water pollution. The Supreme Court on Wednesday appeared to side with the city of San Francisco in its unusual challenge of federal water regulations that said it were too vague and could be interpreted too strictly. The outcome would have sweeping implications for curtailing water pollution offshore and would deal another blow to the Environmental Protection Agency, which has faced a string of losses at the court over its effort to protect the environment. The case has given rise to unusual alliances, with the city joining oil companies and business groups in siding against the EPA. In arguments on Wednesday, it was the conservative justices who seemed most aligned with the city's best known as a liberal bastion. In its core, the case is about human waste and how San Francisco disposes of it, specifically whether the Clean Water Act of 1972 allowed the EPA to impose generic prohibits on wastewater released into the Pacific Ocean and to penalize the city. Almost from the start, the justices appeared to wrestle with what was actually at stake in over an hour of highly technical arguments that centered on sewage discharge permits issued by the agency. Justice Clarence Thomas asked, with this permit, what is at the bottom of the problem? Tara M. Steele, a deputy San Francisco city attorney, replied, what at bottom is the problem is that the permit holders don't know what they need to do to comply. She added that the city officials do not have clear guidance about how to comply with a federal permit aimed at determining how much wastewater can be released without running afoul of the Clean Water Act. Under the current EPA requirement, she said, San Francisco is exposed to crushing criminal and civil penalties, even when it otherwise complies with its 300-page permit. She estimated the city faced $10 billion in penalties from the federal government over the issue. Justice Sonia Sotomayor appeared skeptical of the city's arguments. She focused on the practical matter of how much feces should be permitted to be released in the ocean. I'm sorry, no one's asking you to shift on a dime, Justice Sotomayor said. What they're asking you to do is to become responsible for doing what's necessary, not on a dime, but nothing in the EPA works on a dime, but to take the steps necessary to control situations that develop. But Justice Brett M. Kavanaugh appeared receptive to the city's concerns, expressing skepticism towards the arguments raised by Frederick Louis, an assistant at the Solicitor General, who contended that the EPA does not have the power to issue broad guidelines. Justice Kavanaugh questioned whether the federal government is going after San Francisco based on the past when they didn't know what the relevant limitation on them was and seek retroactively, without fair notice, huge penalties, including criminal punishment, based on unclear standards. Mr. Liu accused San Francisco of failing to provide the federal government with detailed information about its sewage system. Without that information, we're basically flying blind as to how we're going to tell exactly what San Francisco should do to protect water quality, he said. The case poses another test of federal agency power and will be the first chance for the courts to address the effect on its landmark decision last term overruling the Chevron precedent. For decades, courts had relied on the precedent Chevron v. Natural Resources Defense Council, which held that the courts should defer to federal agencies and their expertise when interpreting ambiguous laws. Still, the case heard Wednesday, San Francisco v. Environmental Protection Agency, is a departure from more recent challenges to the EPA brought by attorney generals in Republican-led states that directly seek to curtail the agency's power. Instead, San Francisco sued the EPA during the Trump administration, and officials have pushed back on the idea that the case is a challenge to the federal government's ability to regulate the environment. Its challenge, the city says, aims to clarify the provisions of the city's water waste permit so that the San Francisco can comply with the Clean Water Act. 2 naval aviators died in a plane crash after returning from a tour in Yemen. 2 naval aviators died last week during a training flight, shortly after returning from tours in Yemen, the Navy said. Lieutenant Commander Lindsay Miley Evans and Lieutenant Serena Doug Wildman, both 31 from California, were aboard the EA-18G Growler jet aircraft that crashed near Mount Rainier in Washington state last week. Evans and Wildman recently spent 9 months as a part of the Electronic Attack Squadron 130, also known as the Zappers, in which they carried out strikes against the Houthi, a Yemeni militia backed by Iran. Evans helped develop and execute new warfare tactics that required knowledge, innovation, and a comprehensive understanding of aerial warfare and electronic attack, the Navy said. Evans earned Growler's Tactics Instructor of the Year, 2 single-action air medals, and 3 strike flight air medals between 2023 and March 2024. She additionally participated in an all-women's Super Bowl flyover last year, which commemorated 50 years of women being Navy pilots. Wildman was awarded 3 strike flight air medals between December 2023 and April 2024. Outside the cockpit, Wildman made everyone smile, the Navy said in a statement. She would brighten up any room and was known for her genuine care and compassion of those around her. The Central Park Five are suing Trump over Philly debate comments. Members of the Central Park Five, also known as the Exonerated Five, are suing former President Trump for defamation over comments he made during last month's presidential debate, according to a lawsuit filed in federal court on Monday. The 5, Yusef Solomon, Raymond Santana, Kevin Richardson, Antron Brown, formerly Antron McCray, and Corey Wise, were wrongfully convicted in 1989 of a brutal assault on a New York jogger in Central Park. They were just teens then, and ultimately spent years in prison for crimes they did not commit, before being exonerated by DNA in the confession of a convicted rapist and murderer. But during the September debate at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Trump said that at the time the teenagers admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. The victim in the case is still alive and deals with lingering health effects from her attack. The 5 never pled guilty for the crimes they were charged with. The lawsuit alleges that Trump defamed the men, cast them in a harmful, false light, and intentionally inflicted emotional distress on them, attorney Shannon Spector said in a statement. The plaintiffs seek to correct the record and clear their names once again, Spector said. The 5 men are looking for a trial by jury and for Trump to pay an undetermined amount in compensatory damages, punitive damages, and other costs, the lawsuit says. An attorney for Trump is not yet listed on the case. Prior to the comments Trump made during the debate last month in Philadelphia, there have been a number of times Trump has falsely claimed that the men were responsible for the attack, according to the lawsuit. Following the assault of the jogger in 1989, Trump famously took out a full-page ads in the city mayor's newspapers, calling for the return of the death penalty for those responsible, further inciting racial tensions in the city. What happened on April 1989? In 1989, Tricia Melly was a 28-year-old investment banker out for a job in Central Park when she was brutally beaten and raped. Following the violent attack, Melly fell into a coma for almost 2 weeks and retained no memory of the attack. New York City at the time was dealing with high violent crime rates, and the media covered the case extensively. On the same night Millie was attacked, witnesses told media and police that a group of teenage boys attacked passerbyers and other joggers, robbing and beating them. Police brought in a group of black and Hispanic teen boys. Brown, then McCrae, Richardson, Santana, Wise, and Solemn were subjected to an intense questioning. The boys were christened the Wolf Pack and quickly became symbols of the criminal menace that white New Yorkers felt had captured their city, Pointer said of the media at the time. Trump jumped on the media circus of the day and purchased his full-page ad in the New York Times and other major city newspapers. What happened after the arrest? Brown, then McCrae, Richardson, Santana, Wise, and Solomon broke down after hours of questioning, confessing on videotape, statements the boys ultimately recanted, saying they were coerced. When they were arrested, the police deprived us of food, drink, or sleep for more than 24 hours, Salam wrote in the Washington Post in 2016. Under arrest, we falsely confessed. The 5 pleaded not guilty but were imprisoned and served several years in prison. Solemn wrote in that 2016 article, "Though we were innocent, we spent our formative years in prison, branded as rapists." The case is often used by juvenile justice experts as an example of the vulnerability of children and teens who come into contact with the criminal justice system. The brains are not fully developed, and research shows that juveniles are more likely than adults to confess to a crime they did not commit. The case has also repeatedly been used as evidence of a criminal justice system prejudiced against individuals of color. It wasn't until 2022 the 5 men were exonerated after convicted rapist and murderer Matias Reyes confessed to the crime. Reyes' DNA matched the sample found on Millie. After their convictions were vacated, the 5 men received a multi-million-dollar settlement from New York City. Again and again, Trump has stood by the false belief that the men are guilty. Trump has never apologized for taking out the full-page ad, which did name the 5 men explicitly, and decades later continues to repeat claims that they were responsible for the attack. Trump's comments during the September debate were part of the continuing pattern of extreme and outrageous conduct towards plaintiffs, stretching back decades, the lawsuit filed Monday alleged. The lawsuit always points to a number of times in recent years, including during media interviews, editorials, and in social media posts, in which Trump continued to falsely claim that the exonerated 5 were guilty. Salam wrote in his article that when Trump was asked about the case during a 2016 presidential debate, he said, "They admitted they were guilty," and in a statement in CNN at the time, Trump also said, "The police doing the original investigation say they were guilty. The fact that the case was settled with so much evidence against them is outrageous." Salam said Trump's claims do damage and cause fear and stress. "In some ways, I feel like I'm on trial all over again. I know what it is to be a young black man without a voice, like Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown, who were killed and then crucified in the press. Even though the Central Park 5 were found innocent by court of law, we are still guilty in the eyes of many," Salam wrote. That brings a certain kind of stress. 3 years later in 2019, Trump again said, "You have people on both sides of that. They admitted their guilt," the New York Times reported. "If you look at some of the prosecutors, they think that the city never should have settled that case, so we'll leave it at that." During the debate last month, Trump doubled down. Salam, who along with 3 other members of the exonerated 5, spoke at the Democratic National Convention and is now a New York City Council member, was in the post-debate spin room. When he came face-to-face with Trump, the former president did not appear to know who Salam was when asked by reporters whether he would apologize. The Independent reported on the incident, saying Trump grinned and pointed at Salam, quipping, "That's good, you're on my side." According to the outlet, Salam seemed taken aback. He was in the room supporting Vice President Harris, saying, No, I'm not on your side," before Trump walked away. An organization has a novel way of getting members to vote, but is it legal? In America, we encourage voting as a civic duty, but an organization with millions of members is taking that obligation a step further. It's requiring members to vote or potentially lose their membership and the financial benefits that come with it. The organization is the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, which helps people get low-cost mortgages. NACA says that 3.7 million members, including about 870,000 in the key swing states this election year. We're not saying to people vote for a particular candidate, says NACA CEO Bruce Marks. We're saying that there is so much at stake in this election that you have to have your voice heard. Several legal scholars say they've never seen a policy like NCA's before and aren't sure if it violates the law. I think it's troubling, says Professor Rick Hassan, who directs the Safeguarding Democracy Project at UCLA Law. NACA helps members get mortgages on very good terms, no down payment, no closing cost, and below market interest rates. The organization also wants its members, the vast majority of whom are working class and of color, to be engaged in civic life. But Mark says when NACA urges members to vote, not all of them follow through. Mark said a big reason NACA is making voting a condition of membership. The organization won't kick out members if they don't cast a ballot in this election, he adds, but it might in future federal elections. Obviously, this is a work in progress, Mark said, but we're going to be looking to see whether you voted. NACA can track that because voter participation records are public. The organization is going all out this year. Mark said NACA plans to canvass all 874,000 members in swing states, including more than 400,000 in Georgia. Mark says NACA does not endorse candidates, but that its economic justice and for all political action committee does back those who support affordable home ownership and economic justice issues. Legal scholars say that organization's new membership policy raises questions. Justin Levitt, who served in the Biden White House as senior policy advisor for democracy and voting rights, says a part of the U.S. criminal code makes it illegal to spend money to prompt someone to vote or to withhold their vote or to vote for a particular candidate. Levitt thinks that law, which has been around for nearly a century, could apply to the NACA's new policy. Of course, NACA isn't paying people to vote, but Levitt notes that removing someone as a member could effectively take away their opportunity for low-cost mortgage. That's where Hansen of UCLA thinks there could be a problem. He cites an example involving Ben & Jerry's. In 2008, the company planned to give away free ice cream to people who voted. That is, until Hansen pointed out that a voter giveaway could be illegal under federal law. Just because we don't want to induce people to vote for material gain, he says. Hansen said that because of his intervention, Ben & Jerry's had to offer free ice cream to everyone. I got free ice cream for children, Hansen said. Apprised of Levitt's and Hansen's concerns, Mark defends NACA's new policy. We feel we are absolutely on firm legal grounds, he says. Marx contends that like any organization, say the Elks, NACA is just setting the requirements for participation and membership. That's all we're doing. Same thing, he said. Of course, membership in the Elks doesn't get you access to low-cost mortgage. Doug Fearberg, NACA's outside general counsel, says requiring members to vote is a matter of integrity and values. NACA believes it would be hypocritical for people organizing and talking about economical justice, organizing and talking about things that matter in the American economy, while staying on the sideline and not voting, Fearberg says. Mark says members' response to the new policy has been overwhelmingly positive. Warren Gamble, who retired from the auto industry, said NACA enabled him to buy a home in Atlanta that he otherwise would not have been able to afford. He likes the new policy and believes in NACA's tradition of activism. If you want to be a part of NACA, you want to get all the benefits of all the hard work that everyone's been doing, you need to come to the table, Gamble says. But former NACA member Sylvia White, a financial advisor who lives in Maricopa, Arizona, has doubts. She thinks if the organization enforces its new voting rules, it could alienate some members, especially those who don't like their options at the ballot box. White says they might think, why are you trying to make me vote or do something I don't want to do? People kind of rebel against that. Marx knows NACA may come in for criticism for requiring its members to vote, but he says that's inevitable. Anytime you have an impact, you're going to get pushback, Marx says. You wear that as a badge of honor. That is all that we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. Bye!